How could the strongest man who ever lived end up blind, chained, and grinding grain like a slave? If God had chosen Samson before he was even born, what caused such a powerful man to lose everything? And was Samson's greatest enemy really the Philistines, or was it the battle raging inside his own heart? Stay with us until the end as we uncover the incredible story of Samson, a man blessed with supernatural strength, yet brought down by ordinary temptations. His greatest battle was never against an army. It was against himself. You're watching Jesus Tell Tales. Long before Samson was born, Israel was living through one of its darkest seasons. For 40 years, the Philistines ruled over God's people. Their armies were stronger. Their weapons were superior. Their cities were heavily fortified. But Israel's greatest problem wasn't military weakness. It was spiritual compromise. Once again, the people had turned away from God, worshipping idols instead of the one who had rescued them from Egypt. As they drifted farther from the Lord, they fell deeper under the control of their enemies. Yet even in Israel's darkest hour, God was already preparing a deliverer. In the tribe of Dan lived a man named Manoah and his wife. They carried a quiet sorrow. They had no children. For years they had prayed, hoped, and waited. Then one ordinary day, everything changed. The angel of the Lord appeared to Manoah's wife with an astonishing message. You will conceive and give birth to a son. But this child would not be like other children. From the day he was born, he would belong completely to God. No razor was ever to touch his hair. He was to live as a Nazirite, set apart for God's purpose from his mother's womb. And God gave one more promise. He will begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. When Manoah later offered a sacrifice to God, something incredible happened. The angel of the Lord ascended to heaven in the flames of the altar. Manoah and his wife fell face down in awe, realizing they had witnessed a messenger from God himself. Soon afterward, the promised child was born. They named him Samson. As he grew, the Bible tells us that the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of God began to stir within him. Samson wasn't born strong because of extraordinary muscles. His strength came from God's Spirit working through a life that had been set apart for him. But here's something important to remember. Having a great calling does not mean a person is free from temptation. In fact, Samson's greatest weakness wasn't physical. It was the choices he made. The first signs of trouble appeared when Samson traveled to the Philistine town of Timnah. There he saw a young Philistine woman and immediately decided he wanted to marry her. His parents were shocked. "Isn't there a woman among our own people?" they asked. "Why choose someone from a nation that oppresses us?" But Samson refused to listen. "Get her for me," he insisted. "She is the one I want." It wasn't wisdom that guided his decision. It was desire. On the journey to Timnah, a young lion suddenly charged toward him. At that very moment, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson. With his bare hands, he tore the lion apart as easily as someone might tear a piece of cloth. It was an incredible display of God's power. But sometime later, Samson passed that same place again. Inside the lion's carcass, a swarm of bees had made a hive. Honey filled the body of the dead animal. Samson reached inside, gathered the honey, and ate it. Then he even shared some with his parents without telling them where it had come from. It seemed like such a small decision. After all, it was only honey. But for a Nazirite, touching a dead body violated the vow God had placed upon his life. Samson ignored it. Then he hid it. That is often how spiritual compromise begins. Not with one enormous failure, but with small decisions we convince ourselves don't really matter. At his wedding feast, those small compromises began producing larger consequences. Samson challenged 30 Philistine guests with a riddle based on the lion and the honey. If they solved it, he would reward them richly. If they failed, they would owe him the same. Days passed, but no one could solve the riddle. Growing desperate, the Philistines threatened Samson's bride. If she didn't discover the answer, they would kill her and her family. Under constant pressure, she pleaded with Samson day after day until he finally revealed the secret. She immediately told her people. When the Philistines answered the riddle, Samson instantly realized he had been betrayed. His anger exploded. Empowered once again by the Spirit of God, he struck down 30 Philistine men to settle the wager. Then he stormed away in fury, leaving his bride behind. What had begun as a simple attraction had now become betrayal, violence, and revenge. The man God had called to deliver Israel was already allowing his emotions to control him. And sadly, his greatest mistakes were still ahead. Because soon, Samson would meet a woman whose name would become one of the most famous in the entire Bible. Her name was Delilah, and she would succeed where armies had failed. After the wedding ended in betrayal, Samson's anger only grew stronger. When he returned sometime later to see his wife, he discovered she had been given in marriage to another man. Humiliated and furious, Samson decided to strike back. He caught hundreds of foxes, tied them together in pairs, fastened burning torches between them, and released them into the Philistine fields. Within moments, their wheat fields, vineyards, and olive groves were engulfed in flames. The Philistines demanded to know who had done it. When they learned it was Samson, they took revenge in the cruelest way possible. They burned his former wife and her father alive. What had begun as revenge quickly became a cycle of violence. Samson responded by attacking the Philistines with great force, defeating many of them before hiding in a cave. But what happened next was heartbreaking. Instead of standing beside the man God had raised to deliver them, 3,000 men from Judah came to arrest him. They feared the Philistines more than they trusted God. Bound with new ropes, Samson allowed his own people to hand him over to the enemy. As the Philistines rushed toward him shouting in victory, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson once again. The rope snapped like burnt thread. Looking around, Samson found only the jawbone of a donkey. With that unlikely weapon, he struck down 1,000 Philistine soldiers. Think about that. A single man, armed with nothing more than a donkey's jawbone, defeated an entire army because God's power was with him. But after the battle, Samson collapsed from exhaustion. His throat burned with thirst. For perhaps the first time in a long while, the mighty warrior realized how helpless he truly was. He cried out to God, "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst?" God answered by bringing water from the ground, restoring Samson's strength. It was a powerful reminder that his true source of power had never been his own strength. It had always been God. Sadly, Samson did not hold on to that lesson. Years later, he traveled once again into Philistine territory. There he met a woman named Delilah. Unlike the battles he had already won, this would become the battle he would lose. The Philistine rulers secretly approached Delilah with an astonishing offer. If he could discover the secret of Samson's strength, each ruler would reward her with a fortune in silver. Delilah agreed. Again and again, she asked Samson the same question. "Tell me the secret of your great strength." 3 different times Samson lied to her. Each time, she tested his answer while Philistine soldiers waited nearby. Each time, Samson escaped with ease. It should have been obvious. Delilah wasn't protecting him. She was betraying him. Yet Samson remained. Finally, after days of constant pressure, he gave in. He revealed the truth he had guarded his entire life. "No razor has ever touched my head because I have been dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my hair is shaved, my strength will leave me." That night, as Samson slept with his head resting on Delilah's lap, she called for a man to shave off his hair. Then she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." Samson awoke expecting another easy escape. But this time, nothing happened. Then comes one of the saddest verses in the entire Bible. He did not know that the Lord had left him. The Philistines seized him. They gouged out his eyes, bound him with bronze chains, and led him to Gaza. The same city whose massive gates he had once carried on his shoulders now became his prison. Day after day, Samson pushed a grinding stone like an animal. The man who had once terrified nations had become entertainment for his enemies. The Philistines laughed at him, mocked him, and praised their false god Dagon, believing he had defeated the God of Israel. But while Samson's enemies celebrated, something quiet was happening inside the prison. His hair slowly began to grow again. More importantly, his heart began to change. For the first time in years, Samson had nothing left to depend on except God. His pride was gone. His confidence in himself had been shattered. In the darkness of that prison, the strongest man in the world finally learned what true strength really was. Then came the day the Philistines gathered for a great celebration. Thousands crowded into the temple of Dagon to celebrate Samson's capture. They called for him to be brought out to entertain them. Blind and led by the hand of servant, Samson was placed between the 2 central pillars supporting the massive temple. Quietly, he prayed, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please strengthen me just once more." It was no longer the prayer of a proud warrior. It was a prayer of a broken man who had learned to depend completely on God. Then Samson pushed with all the strength God gave him. The pillars cracked. The temple shook. In a thunderous roar, the entire building collapsed. Thousands of Philistines, including their rulers, were crushed beneath the rubble. The Bible tells us something remarkable. Samson killed more enemies in his death than during his entire life. His final victory did not come through pride. It came through surrender. Looking back, Samson's story is far more than the story of a strong man. It is a story of every person who has struggled with temptation, compromise, and failure. Again and again, Samson chose his own desires over God's calling. Yet God never abandoned him. Even in prison, even in blindness, even after his greatest failures, God was still willing to use him. Centuries later, Samson's name appears in Hebrews 11 among the heroes of faith. Not because he lived a perfect life, but because, in the end, he returned to the God who had called him. Perhaps that's the greatest lesson Samson leaves us. Our failures do not have to be the final chapter. When we humble ourselves before God, His grace is greater than our mistakes. His strength is made perfect in our weakness. And no matter how far we have fallen, God is never finished writing our story. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe to Jesus Tell Tales so you don't miss our next journey through the Bible. And if you watched until the very end, let us know by writing "God is my strength" in the comment below. We'll see you next time with another incredible story from God's Word.